Now we're going to look back on the weekend that was in sport, and joined by our sports editor Derrick Lynch. Good morning to you, sir. How are you?
Good, Alan. How are you?
Very well. Look, lots for us to get into, but let's start with football, and indeed ladies football, and what an occasion it was for St. Joseph's Spanish Point. Munster ladies football Senior A post-primary schools champions.
Yeah, there's a lovely ring to it, isn't it? I'd say that definitely...
I nearly ran out of breath there.
That definitely made it easier going into school this morning after a bit of a bank holiday weekend, didn't it? And I believe there was great scenes as they welcomed them back into the school, and there was a lovely image that Paul Reedy spoke about in his post-match interview, where he said that when they left the school to go to the game, they kind of gathered in what's known as the common area, the assembly part of the school, will say, and all around are pictures of the previous teams from the school that won Munster titles back in the day, won All-Ireland titles as well, which will be their next target. And he kind of said, look, when you come back into this school again, you'll be adding your name to that illustrious list. And they did that in some style, so it was absolutely fantastic for them. And in fairness, they didn't have it all their own way, because 4-12 to 3-13, it was an absolute thriller in terms of scores, but they had so much adversity to overcome in the game, because Loreto Clonmel got a goal very early on in the contest before Spanish Point could respond. And they played effectively a third of the game with 14 players, because they had two sin bins throughout the contest. So one on top of the other, it was, lesser teams could have folded. But I suppose, look, it's a huge team effort, obviously, and 4-12 doesn't happen by accident. But 2-7 for Eddie Hanrahan in a Munster final is incredible stuff altogether. That's an unbelievable performance from a very, very top quality player. Alicia Ryan got a goal. Abby Kelly, who to me I think is one of the up and coming players, we've heard a lot about her obviously through her minor exploits with Clare, but she's onto the intermediate panel now, and she's got a huge future ahead of her. And as the fella says, she didn't lick it off the stones either. Her dad Graham and her uncle Gordon representing Clare with great distinction over the years, so she's a future ahead of her that's massive. As I mentioned, Alicia Ryan, Avian Ryan getting on the scoreboard as well, and plenty more besides. So it's just simply a phenomenal achievement for them to bridge that gap, to have that weight of history going on their shoulders, heading down to Bantier. So much messing around with the fixture because of the weather. It was meant to be in one place, then it was going to be in another, and for young players to keep their focus on that is a phenomenal achievement. They have a bit of a break now from the football. I believe there's mocks and stuff like that have to happen over the next couple of weeks, and then they'll turn their attentions to an All-Ireland semi-final. I think March 10th, that's a Tuesday, I think that's fixed for. They're playing Moat from Westmeath, as far as I can recall. Very strong team there as well, but no better crew than Paul and Emer and Shauna and Fiona Lafferty as well, to have them right and ready for that. So huge achievement for them. 4-12 to 3-13, fantastic achievement. Okay, well done to them, and huge congratulations. We'll move on to the Lidl National Football League Division 3 to be precise, Derrick, and good news for Louth, who remain unbeaten after 2 rounds, but we don't care about that, because unfortunately the same can't be said of Clare, and that's because Louth beat them 4 points in the end. Very low scoring encounter, 176 points in Clare Castle in front of a unfortunately small crowd. Yeah, which is surprising, because on Sunday obviously we were up the country. That's one way of putting it, wasn't it? We'll talk about that later. But I think and just listening to Sid and Joe on commentary from Pairc Chíosóg in the men's football, conditions were okay, and this was played on an Astro, or it was played in Clare Castle, so the surface there should be quite good, and just for whatever reason, Clare that bit sluggish, and that's really disappointing defeat. They had their periods though, didn't they? There was it seemed like the kind of game, Derrick, where both sides at various points were on top, but just I guess Louth made their periods of dominance count more. Yeah, and I suppose ultimately the goal would prove to be the difference on it. But I suppose from a Clare perspective now, you're saying 2 games in, no points on the board, and it's going to get more difficult from here on out, because I keep saying it, in these national leagues, every game there's a half a point goes with it if a head-to-head ever comes into play, and even from a scoring difference perspective, every defeat is getting you more and more into the red. So I think there's a big week ahead now for Clare. I think they play down on Sunday next as well, so that's going to be a massive game for them. They just have to get points on the board, and that won't come easy either. That's a good team that they're facing, so already promotion is looking somewhat out of reach. 2 defeats. Is it a case of consolidation? I think so. I think at this stage it has to be. I think another defeat, you're looking the other way. So I think this weekend ahead is absolutely massive now for Graham Shine and his squad. Okay, we will move on. Let's move on to a Clare side who did win, and that is the Banners senior hurlers, who enjoyed victory up north. We're going to hear about Derrick's trip in just a moment.
230 to 119 in the end. Saw Brian Lowen's side win in Cushendall. And let's hear from the Clare manager speaking afterwards. Admitted his side were under pressure to come away with the win against Davy Fitzgerald's charges, but they delivered in the end. Here he is speaking afterwards.
Players, in fairness, now had a great attitude yesterday, and came with a great attitude this morning as well. So that's important, that it wasn't just a day out. There was a good bit of work that had to be done, and we were under pressure for a performance and a result. I suppose more pressure to get the result, and we did that.
Okay, Brian Lowen speaking after that 230 to 119 victory, which makes it 2 out of 2 for Clare, following up on their home win over Dublin last time out. We're joined also now by our hurling analyst, former Clare captain Tommy Guilfoyle. Derrick, a long trip, but worth it in the end. Clare racking up a decent score.
Well, firstly, the company on the trip made it fly. We didn't feel it up the road at all. We even dealt with a closure on the main road into Belfast on the way up that sent us off for. We saw one of the biggest solar farms I've ever seen in all my life. Not sure what townland or where it was, but it was massive anyway. And got to Cushendall. What a beautiful part of the country, firstly. God almighty, the scenery would take your breath away when you pull in first. So.
I enjoyed these more than the match reports when Derrick turns into Bill Bryson and is his travelogue.
Yeah, but it is. It's just gorgeous, like, and a real brilliant facilities up in Chíosóg. They've 3 pitches there. They've a lovely kind of wall ball astro section, and a nice little club bar that we didn't get to feel the full benefit of really now, but the Coca-Cola was nicer, right, I have to say. But on the field, like, in fairness to Clare, they stayed in Belfast the night before, so they were still a good hour and 10 minutes on the bus from the grounds and got there loosened up and hit the ground running. I think that was key. When in the first quarter it was very clear that Clare were in control. OK left a good few opportunities behind them, something around a 50% conversion rate, which management weren't overly pleased with, but again, it was the 1st of February. To be creating the chances, I think, is good. To be converting them would be better, but there's plenty of time left to kind of solidify that. And I think once the first goal went in from Shane Meehan, it kind of killed the game as a contest, really. And Clare took the foot off the pedal a little bit. They got to ring the changes, picked up a couple of injuries, I think, which will be of concern, particularly Rory Hayes and John Keneally, who have been playing really well in defence. So a couple of injuries last week, a couple of injuries again this week. So that's why you need the depth in the panel. But I think the management will come away pleased, 2 from 2, and I think really strongly on course now for a place in the final.
Yeah, and Tommy, just to bring you in on this, look, Belfast is a place where Clare have come unstuck before. 5 years ago, we previewed this game by mentioning that, there was Dave Fitzgerald narrative, there was the fact that Antrim would feel a bit sore about the manner of their opening day defeat, also moving the game to Cushendall, playing whatever cards they could to narrow the gap between themselves and Clare. But ultimately, in the end, a good win, albeit, as Derrick says, a bit to work on, but overall Brian Lowen will be happy.
Yeah, Alan, I think, the gap between, where Clare are at the moment and where Antrim are at, that gap is fairly wide. Now, in fairness to Davy Fitz and his management team, I think, Antrim, are in transition. One thing that was very noticeable before the game, they're very young and light. So, Clare would have had the physicality and the experience on them. But, I think Clare did what they had to do. Set out their stall fairly early to get the ball to the inside line. And, Shane Meehan and Mark Rogers, were particularly very sharp, albeit, they missed a couple of scores. But I think overall, the creation of the chances, I think, the decision making on the ball, I thought Diarmuid Ryan and Cathal Malone as our wing backs, gave great supply to that inside line, and that's something that you can work on the shot execution, but it's the creation of the chances, I think. But overall, I think from a Clare point of view, job done. Not sure how much they learned from the outing, but it's 4 points in the bag, and we move on to Down next week, and that will be a big challenge. They've put up some big scores lately, but you would expect, Brian Lowen spoke about, turning up with the right attitude. If Clare turn up and perform, you would imagine that there's 2 more points to be picked up.
Yeah, I suppose, Derrick, look, as you said, the shooting, if your wides are into the double figures, before you've even reached half time, nor will you saying that's a huge area of concern. But in a game of like this, it doesn't matter as much as long as you acknowledge it and address it.
Yeah, but I think in the main, when you look at the wides, when you go through them, like there were shots that were on. So
it was worth having a go.
Well, I think Clare have cut out of their game in a couple of games this year, and is some of the Hail Marys. I don't think that's happening as much anymore. There's good quality supply going into that inside line, and they're getting a great return. Like Mark Rogers is looking, as Tommy said, hugely sharp. Another brilliant
deserving man of the match.
100%, absolutely. Yeah, Shane Meehan, Tony Kelly got his hat full of points, and good strong runs around the middle third as well from Clonmel and these guys. So yeah, I think that's the big thing from a Clare point of view. The shots are on, they're having them, and as the year wears on, it'll lend itself to a bigger challenge. But Tommy's hit the nail on the head there with something in terms of the attitude, and I think it's management setting the example on this. While as supporters we'd be saying, is it a case of running the bench against the next couple of teams that we're facing? Management don't want to hear about that. They want, like, you go back to this time last year, we were gasping for a first win. We had lost to Kilkenny in that National League opener and would go on to just win one game in that entire campaign. This year now it's 2 wins on the board already, so it's a totally different mindset, totally different train, and they'll do everything in their power to make sure it keeps chugging along. League final will be the target, and that's 2 weeks out then from the first round of championship. So it's about momentum, confidence, and I suppose that winning feeling.
Yeah, and Tommy, as you touched on, next game is next weekend, Sunday, when Down are the visitors to Ennis. And as you said, they'll present a stiffer challenge. They were unlucky not to get something from their game with Wexford. Two late points saw Wexford win out in the end. So even with home advantage, this will be, do you expect a bit of a step up from the Antrim game?
I would, I think probably Down are a more established panel. Even though they have been playing in this division, but I think they have really embraced the challenge of coming up against Wexford the first and again the first day out. So they have that ability to score 25 points on a Liam McCarthy team like Wexford. You have to be doing something right, and I'm sure Clare will be well versed in that. Personally, I think maybe that he may have the opportunity to, I won't say experiment, but to shift the deck chairs around a small bit, give guys a chance maybe of a start, because it's all geared towards building the strength and depth in the panel for the Munster Championship. Now you will pick up injuries. I believe we have a couple of players involved in Fitzgibbon, which in fairness to Brian didn't play them or bring them on. So that's good player management welfare from Brian's point of view. So they have a Fitzgibbon semi-final midweek. So I suppose he'll wait and see, assess the situation. But I think they will approach the game like they approach every other game, in the proper frame of mind. Yeah, there could be changes. There might be changes. Guys are training. So, they're chomping at the bit to get in. They don't want to be, just making the 26. They want to go in, put their hand up and take their chance. So, yeah, it's a home game. So Brian Lohan always prides himself on, turning up and playing in Chíosóg Pairc, albeit, it's Division 1B, but you can only play what's in front of you.
Very true. And look, we'll preview that game on Friday. Derrick, we'll move on to disappointment in the Dr. Harty Cup Final for St. Flannan's College. Tight game, but ultimately the competition's most successful side losing out to St. Joseph's, Nenagh, across the road from us here, 20 points to 18, who were themselves were champions only 2 years ago, so they won it twice in 3 years. Talk to us about the game and how close St. Flannan's were or not to winning this.
It was a strange one to assess, really. I think St. Flannan's would have huge regret on this game, because in the inside line of Thomas O'Connor, Owen O'Connor and Dara McNamara, they had 3 really good ball winners that were winning every ball that went into them. But for, I suppose, to be, don't mean to be critical on it now, but just when you're trying to analyse it, you're saying there was periods of the game where the ball should have gone into them and didn't, and they clearly had the beating of their men inside, and just that little bit of hesitancy, they got turned over a couple of times in the middle third, and Nenagh picked off a couple of really, really good scores, like this guy, this captain, Owen Dowhan, like an incredible player. Keep an eye out for him, as I said, from tip teams in the coming while.
12 of the 20 points.
Yeah, and some of them are top draw. Like there was one in particular out in the far sideline in the first half into the Aldi, and he was looking at the terracing stand. Like, I mean, as a defender, they had done everything they could. They had shepherded him out. They were between him and the goal, and he just somehow got to flick the wrists over his shoulder and sent over a gorgeous score. Like, and you can't do much with when you have a guy like that. But firstly, and I see him actually, he's across the road this morning already getting work prepped for next Sunday, to David Hoy and his pitch committee. The work they've done in Pairc, Chíosóg, when you see all the places that were flooded and out of action at the weekend, they had the Harty final there on Saturday. Despite the screen saying please stay off the pitch, that was never going to happen. It got trampled, and then on Sunday again hosted the football. So just an incredible hats off to him and his team for all the work that they're doing over there. Okay. But certainly from St. Flannan's, good performance. One or two players that maybe weren't as prominent as they might have liked to have been, and certainly a sense of regret just at times not being maybe as direct as would have returned a little bit more. Okay, a quick reflection yourself, Tommy, on the game before we go to the break.
Yeah, look, we in the preview we would have spoken about the fact that Flannans have been given team start, and in fairness, they came out of the blocks, and for the first 15-20 minutes, we're on top. But slowly but surely, Nenagh, I think, adapted to what Flannans were at. Cut the supply to that inside line, and then Doohan came alive. But even with 10 minutes to go, there was nothing in the game. Probably from a St. Flannan's point of view, they weren't direct enough. I don't think they used the inside line maybe as they should. From Flannan, it'll be one of regret. Home final in Cusack Park, and just 7,000 people paid into the game for a college's game. I mean, it was just kind of an unreal atmosphere for a school's game. One would have thought it could have been even more than a National Hurling League game. Great crowds, played in the right spirit, great supporters, and that. For Flannans now, the thing is to get their head around, they're not out of it. They spoke about last year losing the Harty final and not reacting in the proper way above against Athenry. Now, I think they'll be smarting, they'll be disappointed. So we'll just see how they rebound. And if they do, who knows? They may get another chance at Nenagh, in an All-Ireland Colleges final. But disappointment initially, but I think they'll have to leave it behind them, get their heads around it, get their heads right for an All-Ireland semi-final or quarter-final against, I think it's Connacht opposition. So disappointment on the day for Flannans, but not all lost yet.
Yeah, and I suppose they can take comfort from that. All right, we'll park that there for the moment. Stay with us though. We'll be back to reflect on Clare's defeat to Westmeath in the National Football League after this break.
Giving you the facts, getting to the truth. Morning Focus on Clare FM.
And we're continuing our review of the sporting weekend here on Morning Focus, and we're turning our attentions to the big ball, and unfortunately 2 defeats out of 2 for Paul Madden's Clare side, losing out by 5 points in the end at home to Westmeath, 219 to 117 the final score at Zimmer, Biomet, Pairc, Chíosóg. And let's hear from Paul Madden speaking afterwards, who said his side contributed to their own defeat with the level of possession that they conceded through errors that were unforced.
That's the nature of this game now. If you turn over ball, it's kind of a seesaw game. And they got a couple of scores, kind of let them in handy enough for a few of those scores, and then the goal probably, they put a bit of a glass on the first half for them, but we caused our own problems in the first half. We turned over the ball needlessly. We got caught then on the break, and they tapped over scores, and the goal was a bit of a sucker punch for our time.
Paul Madden there, Derrick still with me, and Syl O'Connor joins us as well. Syl, you were there. Disappointment for Clare, and 2 defeats out of 2 now following the opening day loss, and your reflections on the game. Is fairly low scoring for a good chunk of the first half, 4 points apiece in the 26th minute, but goals are crucial, as we say so often, and it was Westmeath who went in with a handy cushion at the break.
Again, I suppose when you look back on this game, and when I was thinking here to myself of what questions you would ask me this morning as relating to this game, yeah, you've hit the nail on the head on one of them. 26 minutes gone at 4 points apiece. We were playing against the breeze at that particular stage, so we were in a reasonably good position, and we had a good percentage of the ball as well. But again, which we have seen over and over, that closing 10 or 12 minutes was a real body blow for Clare, because it ended up, as you said, 8 points between the sides at half time. And you'd be shaking your head going in, because you'd be looking and saying, how do we get from level pegging, going well, solid enough, and then go 8 points down in a flash? That was a real body blow from a Clare point of view. Then, to add to that, naturally enough, if you're inside the dressing room of the team leading by 8, the first thing you'll say to yourself is get a point or two on the board and really put them thinking. And that's exactly what Westmeath did. We were 9 points down. But then we had a most fantastic 15, 20 minutes from a Clare point of view, because they brought that back to 2 points between the sides. The momentum was absolutely fantastic. The crowd were really getting into the game. And then you'd ask yourself, what went wrong? There is no doubt whatsoever about it. But if you look at the two, if you went back at the start of this league, I said to you that after 2 games, we would have scored 3 goals and 31 points. You'd have said to yourself, not a bad place to be, sounds good. But the big problem was, no doubt, conceding 438 in those 2 games was huge. And you could visibly see what happened. The Westmeath attack was like an arrow. It was straight down the centre of the Clare defence. And when they got that momentum going, the breaking ball, they were attacking in numbers. Real problem for Clare. And that's the problem, I say, that Paul Madden and his management team will look at going forward. But as I said, when we're good, we're very good. When we're otherwise, we can be very, very hesitant as regards defensive work.
And Derrick, I guess, as Silla's touched on there, up the top end of the pitch, things are grand enough, but at the back, 438 after 2 games, serious issues.
But see, that's the disappointing thing. It's almost a replica of our conversation last week, where we said the centre of the Clare defence was very exposed against Down up in Newry. And, I was talking to our Munster Council delegate on the way down the road on Sunday, and it was a similar kind of analysis that we just got opened up down the middle. As Syl said there, Westmeath's directness, led to a lot of scores. So I think that's it. Now, I think Cillian Irvine coming back fit, if he can, for Fermanagh, will be huge in shoring that up. I think at the moment it's kind of a patched up middle of the defence, and you're kind of probably asking players to play roles that they may not be overly comfortable with. So I wouldn't be laying an awful lot of blame at him, but at the same time, it's 2 in a row now, and that's a trend. One is noticeable, 2 is a trend, and it's also a second 5-point loss in a row, which means not only are Clare on bottom of the table on 0 points, but they're at -10 on the scoring difference as well. And I think promotion at this stage is probably getting beyond our grasp, because Down and Westmeath, 2 of the favourites for promotion, and now they have the head-to-head on us as well. That's the point. That's the half a point I keep talking about in these defeats in the National League. So the Fermanagh game now becomes massive.
Yeah, massive game, Syl. I suppose the only consolation is, as Derrick says, Clare put no points and -10 scoring difference. The only side keeping them off the bottom place in the table is Fermanagh themselves, who have a -11 scoring difference. Another trip up north for Clare on the 15th against Fermanagh. They really do, for a number of reasons, some of which Derrick has just touched on, have to get 2 points on the board against Fermanagh.
And there is no question about that. And in fairness to Paul Madden, he didn't step back from it in any shape or form. He knew exactly what had happened on the day. We had the ability to win it. You have to ask yourself, had we the real belief or the structure to win it? And I think that's the one question he was talking about afterwards, to sit down as a management team, look at where we can improve on this, look at where it went wrong. And, they're in a good position to do that, because they have a lot to play with. They have a lot to play with as regards exactly why we're conceding that. Up front, as I said, some fantastic 2-pointers, an Alan Sweeney goal. The place was absolutely buzzing. To get that in Enniskillen as well will be a tough venture, I know. But look, we are where we are right now, and they know exactly where we are, and we know what we need to achieve in Enniskillen. Bottom line is, at this particular stage, from a Clare point of view, 100%, we have to get points on the board, and we can let everything else take care of itself after that. But points on the board at this stage. It won't be easy, but it won't be easy for anybody else either.
Yeah, final quick word to you on this, Derrick. As you said, you touched on that after the Down game. It sounds like it wasn't resolved against Westmeath. Maybe the only saving grace is a fortnight of a gap until that trip to Fermanagh. would you be confident that can be shored up the middle?
I think so. As I say, like the return of Cillian Ryan, who is of course the team captain for the year, I think that'll be massive, because him coming back to anchor the defence will allow one or two others maybe to be released a little bit further up the pitch rather than being relying on their defensive duties. And we're going to need that as well, because okay, things are okay up top, but the reality is that under these new rules, unfortunately, and Clare have now, again, when you talk about consistency of scoring, 2-14 and 1-17, that's a 20-point tally on both occasions. That's not enough anymore, unfortunately, to win these games. Under the old rules, you were kind of hitting towards 16-17 points to be enough to win. Now with the new dynamic, that has gone well into the 20s. So yes, problems at the back, yes, okay, scoring okay up front, but more will be needed. I think more will be needed, yeah.
Okay, we'll park that one there for the moment, folks. My thanks to Syl and to Derrick.